I am John Kaiser in Toronto, March 3rd, 2019, at the Metals Investor Forum, talking to Steve Robertson of Sun Metals Corp. Steve, welcome to Toronto.
Thanks, John.
Steve, in your presentation, you mentioned that when your group took on the Stardust project, you did a complete digital compilation of all the historical data, and this was $10 million of historic money spent on this project. There is an existing resource. It has helped you rethink the potential. Can you tell us what led to the spotting of hole 421, which delivered a substantially longer interval than any of the previous intercepts in this system, and has a grade that's $500 rock or so at current metal prices? Can you elaborate on how that came about, that hole that basically turned the season into a complete success?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really does start with the data compilation. We recognize that these types of very complex systems are a lot easier to explore when you can see them in 3 dimensions, when you can put them into a model where you can spin things around and use all of the tools in the toolbox. So you can turn on geophysics or turn it off as you need, or some of the geochemistry that you need. This was a target that was down in one of the highest grade areas that had ever been seen on the project. And so we wanted to very specifically target an extension of that might be a fluid flow pathway leading back to the source of the fluids. And I think we were successful in finding that. But it wouldn't have been possible without all that, technology to go along with it.
Now people fret that while you have only one intercept, and we saw in Brent Cook's presentation today, fairly negative about how extrapolation of intercepts can end in a lot of tears down the road when you finally get more holes into it and find out that you actually have discrete bodies. And a risk with this intersection is that maybe it is just a discrete body. And as you start drilling, what is the strategy for mapping out this new target that's sort of 500 meters deep? You're not going to do like 100-meter step outs and hope to get lucky. How are you going to approach that this season when work resumes?
Yeah, well, first of all, we have to learn a little bit more about what nature of the mineralization is, where it came from and where it was going to, in terms of the fluid flow that actually deposited that mineralization. So we're going to be very systematic and very careful about making sure that we understand that. And once we do understand that, we'll start to be more aggressive with our step outs, because we do have to build tons. And we're not going to be able to do that 15 meters at a time. We'll have to take more aggressive step outs at some point. But I do like one of the themes that Brent had in his presentation this morning is fail early. And I think that's a philosophy that I like to follow. We like to make sure that we provide the resources to be able to go in and kick something hard enough to know whether or not it's there. And I think that's what we plan to do, is make sure that there's a very thorough investigation of the area around hole 421, so that we know exactly what we're dealing with and whether it's going to be worth pursuing, and I suspect it will be.
Now, last year's program had holes drilled in many locations around the Glover Stock. Some were geological targets, some were geophysical targets. Nothing that was reported, resembled in anything as spectacular as hole 421. But suppose this negative scenario is that it suddenly disappears and just does seem to be, maybe several 100,000 tons of this high-grade deep material, and you realize this fairly quickly. From what you learned with that other drilling, where would you carry on to further pursue this idea that there's a lot more to this Stardust system than what we already know?
Yeah, well, we do have other high priority targets that we weren't able to get to in 2018, so there are other secondary things that we will be following up on with a second drill in the 2019 season that aren't going to be the focus of our work. Our focus is definitely going to be around hole 421. The reason for that is because of the amount of complexity we see in that mineralization. A couple of geologists have gone through that drill core, and one estimated that there was 9 different packets of differing chemistry fluids that had gone through to create the chaos in hole 421. And another guy went through and said that there was 13 different episodes that had created that. So this is a complex, long-lived system. Those are the characteristics that make for big, rich, mineralized bodies, and we're pretty confident that we're going to be able to find more of that style of mineralization. I don't think that it's, if we find out that it's just the pathway has just disappeared, something's gone wrong, because the hot acidic fluids that actually form this type of mineralization can't passively pass through the carbonate rocks. There has to be some trace of them. So it might neck down to something smaller, or it might blow out to something bigger. But one way or another, we'll find that fluid pathway and follow it.
Now, on your website, you have a video of Dr. Peter McGaw looking at this core and using his expertise to say the mineralogy of this indicates that you're closer to the heart of this type of system than the Canyon Creek skarn that's already been delineated, but you're still not at the best. And from the the boring part of an exploration program, the geology and all that, have you been able to develop a geological context as to where the heart would be, that if there is some local fault displacement where as you start stepping out you lose it, but obviously it can't exist by itself based on the volume of fluid flow that was required? Have you developed an idea of where you would then do these riskier step outs to recover it and get even closer to where the ultimate goodies are located?
Yeah, we have thought a lot about the different potential scenarios that could have resulted in this type of mineralization, and we don't want to constrain ourselves too much and get in love with one idea and forget about everything else. We want to remain fairly open-minded, but clearly I think that we're going to be looking to the north. That seemed to be the trend, where things were getting richer as we went to depth and to north. Hot acidic fluids, of course, are going to ascend, so they go up as they deposit mineralization, so we'll probably be starting to look down as we look for that fluid feeder pathway. There's a lot of indication that we've got quite a distance to go before we find the source of the fluids as well. Some areas of hole 421 were still 30% by volume of garnet. Garnet is a mineral that is formed in the earlier phases of the alteration in this type of system, and when the mineralization gets deposited later, quite often it wipes out the garnet. If we were right at the source of the fluids, there would have been probably enough energy in the system that the garnets would be completely wiped out. But because we have so much garnet left in patches of that mineralization, we have a good feeling that there's quite a distance to go in this style of mineralization before we actually get into this real source of the fluid. So that's great news, because it means that we've got lots of tons to build on the way.
In January, or recently, you struck a deal with Lorain Copper, which was the original owner of the project, and they were supposed to get a large block of stock to finalize this deal, but instead you are going to merge. It gets rid of a royalty. It makes everything simple. What is the timing for when this will happen, when it will all be done, so that Sun Metals is Sun Metals with 100% and none of these loose ends?
Yeah, we really wanted to time that so we could get rid of this housekeeping exercise before we get into the exploration season. So the shareholder vote for Lorain shareholders is April the 5th, and indications, I mean, this truly is a win-win scenario for both companies, so indications are that there will be a positive vote, and then we should be able to close the deal about a week after that. So around April the 12th, we expect to close.
Okay, so mid-April, which is about the time you hope to get back onto the project?
Yeah, we've had a bit of a setback in terms of our winter conditions up on the property. We had a very, very mild winter going through until the end of January. The big lake, Takla Lake, hadn't even frozen over this year, which was the first time in the Chief's memory up there that the lake hadn't frozen over. But since then, there's been quite a return to normal winter conditions, and now our target time for startup would be about mid-May.
Now British Columbia goes through these periodic government changes where a government ends up in charge. It used to be called the New Democratic Party. Maybe they are still there, but they had generally an anti-mining attitude. I understand there is an NDP government in power now. Is there any danger of going back, 15 or more years to when everybody fled British Columbia because permitting anything became a nightmare?
You know what, I really find British Columbia to be a Tier 1 jurisdiction. We do have a provincial government now that's NDP. I know the Premier and many of his ministers. As far as I know, everybody seems to be very supportive of mining. They just made the flow-through financing permanent in British Columbia, so I think that's a pretty clear indication of the value that they put on our industry. And so far, I think that the indications are all fairly positive, that they're very supportive of our industry. It's a complicated place to work. You've got to be able to work with First Nations and that sort of thing. So it's nothing's dead simple, and that's the case everywhere in the world now, I think. But all in all, I think there's no place I'd rather be than British Columbia.
Something like Quebec, where in addition to the federal flow-through deduction, there's also a provincial level where British Columbia residents, by investing in British Columbia plays, get an extra flow-through bonus.
That's correct, and it's really an advantage that we have here in Canada over the rest of the world, because the financing that we just completed before Christmas, we raised $5.2 million. That was a charity flow-through where we are actually being able to piggyback the flow-through tax advantages on top of charitable contribution tax advantages. And we were able to attract Teck to come in and pick up the entire financing, and resulted in us being able to be fully funded for 2019.
Now, I was impressed that Teck came in through this flow-through backdoor to basically top up your treasury and put you in excellent shape heading into this new exploration season. Mm-hmm. Were you guys surprised? Did you chase down Teck, or did Teck come knocking on your door?
We had been in conversation with Teck since the spring. They knew what we were doing. They happened to have one of the guys on their staff did his PhD in carbonate replacement systems, so they had a pretty good understanding of what it was that we were trying to explore for. And then when we hit the result of 100 meters of 4.99% copper equivalent, they were fully up to speed with what we were doing, and it didn't take them very long to make the decision to make an investment.
Well, I hope this works out for Teck the way it did back in 1994 when they put up $100 million in equity in Boise's Bay, a little company called Diamond Fields, and that turned into a huge score. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much, John.